It was midnight when I overheard my daughter-in-law on the phone. After she signs the house transfer, we'll put her in a nursing home. My son nodded. Yes, she really is a burden. My blood froze. The next day, we went to sign a document. My signature broke them. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Yvonne, and I'm 57 years old. Until 3 months ago, I thought I knew what heartbreak felt like. I was wrong. Real heartbreak isn't losing your husband of 32 years to cancer, though that nearly destroyed me. Real heartbreak is discovering that the son you raised, the child you sacrificed everything for, sees you as nothing more than an obstacle to overcome. It was midnight on a Tuesday when my world shattered. I had gotten up to get a glass of water, my throat dry from the medication I take for my blood pressure. The house felt different at night now, too quiet, too empty since Robert passed away 8 months ago. Marcus and Avalon had moved in temporarily to help me through the grief, or so they said. At first, I was grateful. The loneliness was crushing, and having them there made the house feel alive again. I was padding down the hallway in my slippers when I heard Avalon's voice coming from the guest room. She was on the phone, her tone sharp and businesslike, completely different from the sweet, caring voice she used when talking to me during the day. After she signs the transfer of the house, we'll take her to the nursing home, she said, and my blood turned to ice. I pressed myself against the wall, my heart hammering so loud I was afraid they would hear it. The place I found is perfect, cheap, and they don't ask too many questions about family visits. I couldn't breathe. My legs felt weak, and I had to grip the doorframe to stay upright. This couldn't be happening. Not my daughter-in-law, not the woman I had welcomed into my family, helped plan her wedding, babysat her children. Then I heard Marcus's voice, and my heart broke completely. You're right. Mom's really become a burden. Dad's gone, and she's just taking up space in this huge house. The property's worth at least $800,000, probably more with the market the way it is now. A burden. My own son called me a burden. I've already talked to the lawyer, Avalon continued. Once we get power of attorney, everything will be smooth. She trusts you completely, so getting her to sign won't be hard. We just need to make it sound like it's for her own good. What about the neighbors? They've known her for 20 years. We'll tell them she's developing dementia, that she needs specialized care. People believe what they want to believe, especially when it comes to older women. I bit my knuckle to keep from crying out. Dementia. They were going to tell people I had dementia to justify stealing my home, my life, everything Robert and I had built together. The nursing home costs $3,000 a month, Avalon said. But the house sale will cover that for years and we'll have plenty left over. Marcus, we could finally buy that lake house we've been looking at. What if she fights it? She won't. Look at her, Marcus. She's lost without your father. She barely leaves the house, barely takes care of herself. She'll be grateful that someone else is making the decisions for her. I stood there in the dark hallway, trembling, listening to them plan my entire future like I was already dead, like I was some senile old woman who couldn't think for herself. The worst part wasn't even the money, though $800,000 was everything Robert and I had worked for our entire lives. The worst part was realizing that the people I loved most in the world saw me as nothing more than an inconvenience. I crept back to my bedroom, my mind reeling. How long had they been planning this? How long had Marcus looked at me and seen dollar signs instead of his mother? I thought about all the times Avalon had insisted on helping with my bills, offering to organize my finances, all the times she'd suggested I was getting forgetful, that I should let them handle important decisions. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the framed photo of Robert on my nightstand. He would have been devastated. Marcus had been his pride and joy, the son who was going to carry on the family name, take care of his mother when the time came. Robert had even changed his will to make sure the house stayed in the family, adding special provisions that I never fully understood. The next morning, I could barely look at them during breakfast. Avalon made me scrambled eggs and toast, asking sweetly if I had slept well. Marcus kissed my forehead and told me he loved me, just like he had every morning since moving in. It all felt like poison now. Mom, We need to talk to you about something important today, Marcus said, setting down his coffee cup. Avalon and I have been thinking about your future, about what's best for you. My stomach clenched. It was starting. We know how hard things have been since Dad died, Avalon added, reaching over to pat my hand, and we want to make sure you're taken care of properly. I forced myself to nod, to play the part of the grieving widow who needed guidance. What did you have in mind? Well, there are some financial things we should probably handle together. You know, to protect your assets, make sure everything is set up the right way for the future. They were so smooth, so practiced. I wondered how many other families they had done this to, or if I was just their first victim. We have an appointment with a lawyer this afternoon, Marcus said. Just to go over some paperwork. Nothing complicated. Nothing complicated. Just signing away my entire life. As I sat there, nodding and agreeing to their plans, I felt something inside me harden. They thought I was weak, that grief had made me stupid and helpless. They thought I would just sign whatever they put in front of me and thank them for taking care of everything. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The lawyer's office felt like a trap. Marcus and Avalon flanked me on either side as we sat in the sterile waiting room, their presence suffocating. I kept my hands folded in my lap to hide the trembling, forcing myself to breathe normally while my mind raced. They had no idea I knew what they were planning, and I intended to keep it that way until I figured out my next move. Mrs. Henderson, the lawyer will see you now, the receptionist announced. Henderson, not even our family lawyer, but someone Avalon had chosen. Someone who didn't know me, didn't know Robert, didn't know our family history. The office was small and cramped, with generic artwork on the walls and a desk covered in neat stacks of papers. Mr. Henderson was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with the kind of smooth confidence that made my skin crawl. He shook my hand with a practiced smile. Mrs. Patterson, I understand you want to make some arrangements for your estate planning. Very wise of you to think ahead. Avalon leaned forward in her chair. Yes, we're concerned about Yvonne's ability to manage such a large property on her own. The house is quite valuable, and there are so many maintenance issues, property taxes, insurance complications. Of course, Henderson nodded, pulling out a thick folder. These situations are quite common. Adult children often need to step in to help their aging parents manage complex financial situations. Aging parents. I was 57 years old, not 87. But I said nothing, just watched as Henderson spread several documents across his desk. Now, what we have here is a straightforward property transfer, he explained, pointing to the papers. This will transfer ownership of the house at 123 Maple Street to your son Marcus Patterson and his wife Avalon Patterson. This protects the asset from potential future complications and ensures smooth management of the property. I stared at the documents, my vision blurring slightly. There it was, in black and white. They wanted me to sign away the house Robert and I had bought as newlyweds, the house where we raised Marcus, where we hosted Christmas dinners and birthday parties, where Robert took his last breath. What about Yvonne's living arrangements? Marcus asked, and I almost laughed at how concerned he sounded. We want to make sure she's comfortable and well cared for. Absolutely, Henderson replied. The transfer includes a clause allowing Mrs. Patterson to remain in the home for as long as she's able to live independently. Should her health decline to the point where she needs specialized care, the new owners would be responsible for arranging appropriate accommodations. Specialized care. They couldn't even say nursing home to my face. And the financial aspects? Avalon asked. How would that work? Henderson shuffled through more papers. Once the transfer is complete, any costs associated with Mrs. Patterson's future care would be handled through the property's equity. The new owners would have full authority to make decisions about selling or borrowing against the property to fund those needs. My throat felt dry. They were going to sell my house to pay for the cheapest nursing home they could find, then pocket the rest. I thought about that conversation I overheard, about the lake house they wanted to buy with my money. This all sounds very reasonable, I said quietly, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. But I'd like to read through everything carefully before I sign. This is a big decision. Henderson's smile flickered slightly. Of course, Mrs. Patterson. However, I should mention that my schedule is quite full this week. If we could handle the signing today, it would save everyone a lot of time and trouble. Avalon reached over and squeezed my hand. Mom, we've already gone over everything. Marcus and I just want what's best for you. You trust us, don't you? The manipulation was so blatant it made me sick. They were counting on my grief, my vulnerability, my love for my son to make me sign without thinking. I do trust you, I said, looking directly at Marcus. But this house means everything to me. It's where your father and I built our life together. I just need a little time to process everything. Marcus's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Mom, you're making this more complicated than it needs to be. We're trying to help you. I understand that, sweetheart. But surely you can understand why I'd want to be absolutely certain about something this important. Henderson cleared his throat. Mrs. Patterson, I should also mention that there are some time-sensitive tax implications we need to consider. Waiting could cost you several $1,000s in additional fees and taxes. It was all lies. I could see it in their faces, hear it in their voices. They were getting desperate, worried that I might actually think this through and realize what they were doing. How much time do we have? I asked. Ideally, we'd want to finalize everything by the end of this week, Henderson said. Friday at the latest. That's only 3 days away. Mom, Marcus said, his voice taking on an edge of impatience. Dad's been gone for 8 months. You've had time to grieve. Now you need to start thinking practically about your future. The coldness in his voice hit me like a slap. This was my son, the boy I had rocked to sleep, helped with homework, cheered for at every baseball game. The man I had been so proud of when he graduated college, when he got married, when he got his first promotion. You're right, I said finally. I do need to think practically about my future. I could see the relief on their faces. They thought they had won. Wonderful, Henderson said, reaching for his pen. Shall we proceed with the signing? Actually, I'd like to take the documents home and review them one more time. I promise I'll have them back to you by Thursday. The silence in the room was deafening. Henderson glanced at Marcus and Avalon, clearly unsure how to proceed. Mrs. Patterson, he said carefully, I really would recommend handling this today. These kinds of delays can sometimes lead to complications. What kind of complications? He fumbled for an answer. Legal complications. Family complications. Sometimes when people have too much time to think about these decisions, they start to second-guess themselves, and that can create problems for everyone involved. I stood up slowly, my purse clutched tightly in my hands. I appreciate your concern, Mr. Henderson, but I'm not going to sign anything today. I'll be in touch soon. As we walked out of the office, I could feel the tension radiating from Marcus and Avalon. They had expected this to be simple, easy. They thought I would just go along with whatever they wanted. The car ride home was silent, the air thick with their disappointment and my growing anger. I stared out the window at the familiar streets of my neighborhood, thinking about what would happen if I actually signed those papers. How long would I have before they declared me incompetent? How long before I found myself in some awful nursing home, forgotten and abandoned? That evening, as I sat in my bedroom with the door locked, I called the only person I could trust. My sister Dorothy lived 3 states away, but she had always been there for me. Yvonne? Her voice was warm and concerned. What's wrong, honey? And for the first time since overhearing that terrible conversation, I let myself cry. Dorothy arrived on Wednesday morning, earlier than I expected. I heard her rental car pull into the driveway just as Marcus and Avalon were leaving for work. Through the window, I watched my sister step out of the car, her silver hair perfectly styled despite the long drive from Tennessee. At 62, Dorothy had always been the stronger one between us, the one who spoke her mind and took no nonsense from anyone. Marcus paused by his car, looking confused. Aunt Dorothy? What are you doing here? I came to visit my sister, she replied calmly, pulling her suitcase from the trunk. Is that a problem? No, of course not. It's just, Mom didn't mention you were coming. Well, I'm here now. Dorothy's tone was polite but cool. She had never particularly liked Marcus, though she'd kept her opinions to herself for my sake. Don't let me keep you from work. I opened the door before they could say anything else, rushing to embrace my sister. The relief of having someone on my side. Someone who knew me and loved me unconditionally. Almost brought me to tears again. Thank God you're here, I whispered in her ear. After Marcus and Avalon left, Dorothy and I sat at my kitchen table with coffee and the documents from the lawyer's office spread between us. My sister had worked as a paralegal for 30 years before retiring, and she read through everything with a sharp, professional eye. "This is worse than you described," she said finally, setting down the papers with disgust. "Yvonne, if you sign this, you'll have absolutely no legal rights to your own home. They could throw you out tomorrow if they wanted to. But they said I could stay as long as I'm able to live independently." "Look at this clause here," Dorothy pointed to a section buried in the fine print. "It says the new owners have sole discretion to determine what constitutes independent living. They could decide you're incapable because you forgot to take out the trash one day." My stomach churned. "How is that legal?" "It's legal because you'd be signing it voluntarily. Once this transfer goes through, you'd essentially be a tenant in your own home with no rights and no recourse." I stared at the papers, feeling sick. "There's more, Dorothy. Things I haven't told you yet." Over the next hour, I told her everything. The conversation I'd overheard, the nursing home they'd chosen, their plans to use my money for a lake house. Dorothy's face grew darker with each detail. "We need to find out more about this nursing home," she said grimly, "and I want to know exactly what they've been telling people about your mental state." That afternoon, while Marcus and Avalon were at work, Dorothy made some calls. She had always been good at getting information out of people, and within a few hours, she had pieced together the full scope of their plan. "The nursing home is called Sunset Manor," she reported, her voice tight with anger. "I spoke to someone who had their mother there. Yvonne, it's a nightmare. Understaffed, unsanitary, multiple violations from the state health department. The woman I talked to said her mother lost 30 pounds in 6 months because they barely fed the residents." I felt bile rise in my throat. "That's where they want to put me?" "It gets worse. I called your neighbor, Mrs. Chen. Apparently, Avalon has been talking to people in the neighborhood, telling them you're showing signs of dementia. She's been saying you've been forgetting conversations, getting confused about dates, losing things." "That's not true. None of that is true." "I know it's not, but she's been building a case, creating a narrative that would make everyone believe you need to be institutionalized. Mrs. Chen said she's been worried about you, thought maybe she should call social services." The betrayal cut so deep I could barely breathe. Avalon had been poisoning my relationships with my neighbors, people who had been my friends for decades. She was systematically destroying my reputation, my credibility, my entire life. "There's something else," Dorothy continued, her voice even grimmer. "I did some research on this lawyer, Henderson. He's been disciplined twice by the State Bar Association for questionable practices involving elderly clients. He specializes in what they call asset protection, but it's really just a fancy term for helping families steal from their older relatives." "How did they find him?" "That's what I want to know. This isn't some random lawyer they picked out of the phone book. Someone recommended him specifically for this kind of thing." We spent the rest of the afternoon researching, and what we discovered made me feel like I was living in a nightmare. Dorothy found online forums where people discussed managing difficult aging parents and protecting family assets from nursing home costs. Some of the advice was legitimate, but buried in the discussions were horror stories of children manipulating elderly parents, forcing them into substandard care facilities, and stealing their life savings. "Look at this," Dorothy said, pointing to her laptop screen. "There's a whole section about how to get elderly parents declared incompetent. They call it necessary intervention for cognitive decline." I read over her shoulder, my hands shaking. The advice was disturbingly specific. Document instances of forgetfulness. Convince neighbors the person is declining. Find a sympathetic doctor willing to sign off on cognitive impairment. Choose a lawyer who specializes in elder issues. They've been following a playbook, I realized. This isn't something they came up with on their own. No, it's not, and I have a feeling Avalon has done this before. That evening, when Marcus and Avalon came home, I could barely stand to look at them. Avalon bustled around the kitchen, preparing dinner and chatting about her day as if nothing had happened. She asked about Dorothy's visit, seemed genuinely pleased that my sister had come to see me. "It's so nice that you have family support during this difficult time," she said, setting a plate in front of me. "Dorothy always seems so sensible and practical." Marcus nodded. "Aunt Dorothy, maybe you can help us convince Mom that we're just trying to do what's best for her. She's been resistant to our suggestions about the house." Dorothy smiled sweetly. "Oh, I think Yvonne is perfectly capable of making her own decisions. She always has been." I caught the warning look in my sister's eyes. We couldn't let them know we were onto their plan, not yet. "Actually," I said carefully, "I've been thinking about what you said at the lawyer's office. Maybe you're right. Maybe I am making this more complicated than it needs to be." Avalon's face lit up. "Really? Does that mean you're ready to move forward with the paperwork?" "I think so. But I'd like Dorothy to look everything over first, just to make sure I understand all the details." "Of course," Marcus said, though I could see the tension in his shoulders. "We want you to feel completely comfortable with everything." Later that night, after they had gone to bed, Dorothy and I sat in my bedroom with the door locked, planning our next move. "We need to get you to a different lawyer," she whispered. "Someone who can explain your real options, not someone who's working with them to steal your house." "But what if they're right? What if I can't manage on my own?" Dorothy grabbed my hands, her grip firm. "Yvonne, listen to me. You are not incompetent. You are not losing your mind. You are a grieving widow who's been manipulated and lied to by people who are supposed to love you. There is nothing wrong with you except that you trusted the wrong people." I wanted to believe her, but months of subtle undermining had taken their toll. Every forgotten grocery item, every misplaced key, every moment of confusion had been turned into evidence of my declining capabilities. "Tomorrow, we're going to start fighting back," Dorothy continued. "And the first thing we're going to do is find out exactly what your legal rights are." As I lay in bed that night, listening to the house settle around me, I thought about Robert. He had always been so careful about legal matters, so meticulous about documentation. I remembered him working late into the night at his desk, organizing papers and updating files. He had told me once that he was making sure I would always be protected, no matter what happened. I wondered if there was something in his papers that Marcus and Avalon didn't know about, something that could save me from the trap they were setting. Thursday morning, Dorothy and I drove to the office of Margaret Weinstein, a lawyer Dorothy had found through her old paralegal contacts. Margaret specialized in elder law and had a reputation for protecting seniors from financial abuse. Her office was warm and welcoming, filled with family photos and comfortable furniture that immediately put me at ease. Margaret was probably in her 50s, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that reminded me of Dorothy. She listened carefully as I explained the situation, occasionally asking clarifying questions but never interrupting. When I finished, she sat back in her chair with a grim expression. "Mrs. Patterson, what you're describing is elder financial abuse, and it's more common than most people realize. The fact that they're using a lawyer with Henderson's background makes this particularly concerning. Is there anything I can do to stop them?" "Absolutely. But first, I need to see the original documents for your house. The deed, your husband's will, any trust documents he might have set up." My heart sank. "Those are all at home, in Robert's filing cabinet. But Marcus and Avalon are always there. I don't know how I could get them without raising suspicion." "What about making copies?" Dorothy suggested. "You could tell them you need the documents for some other reason." Margaret nodded. "That could work. Tell them you need to provide documentation for insurance purposes or for updating beneficiary information. Most people don't question those kinds of requests." We spent the next hour going over my options. Margaret explained that if Robert had included certain clauses in his will, or if there were restrictions on the property deed, the transfer Marcus and Avalon were trying to force might be completely invalid. "Many husbands include protective provisions in their wills," she explained. "Especially when there are valuable assets involved. Your husband sounds like he was a careful man." He was. He spent hours making sure everything was organized, that all our legal affairs were in order. Then there's a good chance he included safeguards you don't even know about. When we got home, I was surprised to find Marcus and Avalon both there in the middle of the day. They were sitting at the kitchen table with papers spread out in front of them, looking tense and frustrated. "Mom, we need to talk," Marcus said the moment we walked in. "Henderson called this morning. He says if we don't get the paperwork signed by tomorrow, we'll lose the tax advantages we discussed." It was another lie, another attempt to pressure me into acting without thinking. But now I knew better. "Of course," I said, setting my purse down calmly. "I just need to gather some documents first. My insurance company needs updated information about the property ownership." Avalon frowned. "What kind of information?" "Just copies of the deed, Robert's will, that sort of thing. Standard paperwork." "I can handle that for you," Marcus offered quickly. "You don't need to worry about those details." "That's sweet of you, honey, but they specifically asked that I review everything myself first. Insurance companies are so particular about these things." I could see them exchanging glances, trying to decide whether to push back. But my request sounded reasonable enough that they couldn't object without seeming suspicious. "The filing cabinet in Dad's office is locked," Marcus said. "I think he kept the key in his desk drawer." We all went to Robert's study together, a room that had remained largely untouched since his death. I found the key exactly where Marcus said it would be, my hands trembling slightly as I unlocked the cabinet. Inside were dozens of neatly labeled folders, organized with the same meticulous care Robert had brought to everything in his life. I pulled out the folder marked House Deed and Legal Documents, and another labeled Will and Estate Planning. My heart was pounding as I opened them, praying that Robert had been as thorough as I remembered. "There's a lot of paperwork here," I said, flipping through the documents. "I'll need to make copies of several things. We can take them to the copy shop for you," Avalon offered. "Actually, I'll just use the scanner in Robert's office. That way I can email everything directly to the insurance company." It took me almost an hour to scan all the relevant documents, with Marcus and Avalon hovering nearby the entire time. I could feel their impatience, their anxiety about what I might discover. But I kept my expression neutral, occasionally making comments about bureaucratic requirements and insurance procedures. That evening, after Marcus and Avalon had gone to their room, Dorothy and I spread the documents across my bedroom floor. What we found made my hands shake with a mixture of relief and rage. "Yvonne, look at this," Dorothy whispered, pointing to a clause in Robert's will. "He included a provision that prevents the house from being sold or transferred without the approval of both you and an independent third party, specifically, a court-appointed guardian or a family member not directly benefiting from the transfer." I stared at the document, hardly believing what I was reading. "What does that mean?" "It means that even if you signed those papers tomorrow, the transfer wouldn't be legally valid without additional approvals. Robert was protecting you from exactly this kind of situation." There was more. The deed to the house included a life estate provision, meaning I had the absolute right to live there for the rest of my life, regardless of who owned the property, and buried in the estate planning documents was a letter Robert had written to me, dated just 3 months before his death. "My dearest Yvonne," the letter began, "if you are reading this, it means something has gone wrong with our family situation. I have included several protective measures in our legal documents because I am concerned about Marcus's judgment, particularly regarding his wife. I hope these precautions prove unnecessary, but if they do not, please know that I have tried to shield you from any attempts to take advantage of your trust and generosity." The letter went on to explain each protective provision he had included, along with contact information for a lawyer in the state capital who specialized in estate protection. Robert had anticipated this exact scenario and had spent months crafting legal safeguards to prevent it. "He knew," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. Somehow, he knew this would happen. Dorothy put her arm around me. "Robert loved you, and he was a smart man. He saw something in Marcus and Avalon that you didn't want to see." I thought back to those last months of Robert's life, how strained things had become between him and Marcus. At the time, I had attributed it to stress about Robert's illness, the pressure of watching a parent die. Now I realized Robert had been trying to warn me about something I wasn't ready to hear. What do we do now? Now we contact the lawyer Robert recommended. And tomorrow, when they pressure you to sign those papers, you're going to have a very different conversation with them. That night, I lay awake thinking about the confrontation that was coming. For months, I had felt helpless, overwhelmed by grief, and confused by their manipulations. But now, armed with the truth about their plan and the knowledge that Robert had protected me, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time: power. They thought they were dealing with a vulnerable, grieving widow who would do whatever they asked. They had no idea that Robert had given me the tools to fight back, or that I was finally ready to use them. The next morning, I woke up early and called Margaret Weinstein. I read her the key provisions from Robert's will and gave her the contact information for Robert's recommended lawyer. "Mrs. Patterson," she said after I finished, "your husband created one of the most comprehensive protection plans I've ever seen. Not only can they not force this transfer, but their attempts to do so could actually result in criminal charges for attempted elder abuse. What should I do when they ask me to sign the papers today? Tell them the truth. Tell them you know exactly what they've been planning, and that you have legal representation now. Sometimes, when people realize they can't get away with these schemes, they back down completely. And if they don't back down," Margaret's voice was firm, "then we make sure they face the full consequences of what they've tried to do to you." As I hung up the phone, I heard Marcus and Avalon moving around in the kitchen, preparing breakfast and getting ready for what they thought would be their final victory. They had no idea that their carefully planned scheme was about to collapse around them. Today, I was going to show them exactly who they were dealing with. Friday morning arrived with a tension so thick I could feel it pressing against my chest. Marcus and Avalon were both dressed more formally than usual, as if they were attending some important business meeting rather than manipulating an elderly woman out of her home. Avalon had even put on the pearl necklace I had given her for Christmas 2 years ago, a touch that struck me as particularly cruel. "Ready for the big day, Mom?" Marcus asked, his voice artificially cheerful as he poured himself coffee. "I know this has been stressful, but you'll feel so much better once everything is settled." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral while my heart hammered against my ribs. Dorothy sat beside me at the kitchen table, calmly eating toast and reading the newspaper as if this were any ordinary morning. We had rehearsed this moment dozens of times the night before, but I still felt terrified that I might give something away too early. "I've been thinking about what you said yesterday," I told them, choosing my words carefully. "About how I'm making this more complicated than it needs to be." Avalon's face lit up with relief. "Oh, Yvonne, I'm so glad you're seeing it that way. Marcus and I really do just want what's best for you." "I know you do, sweetheart. That's why I want to make sure I understand everything completely before I sign anything." "Of course," Marcus said, though I caught the slight tightening around his eyes. "What kinds of questions do you have?" I pulled out a notebook where I had written down several innocent-sounding questions, the kind any careful person might ask. "Well, I was wondering about the timeline. When exactly would the transfer take effect?" "Immediately after you sign," Marcus replied. "That way we can start taking care of all the maintenance issues right away." "And the living arrangements? How long would I be able to stay in the house?" Avalon leaned forward, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Oh, Yvonne, you can stay as long as you want. We would never force you to leave your own home." The lie came so easily to her that I felt sick. Just 3 nights ago, I had heard her discussing the cheap nursing home where they planned to dump me. "What about major decisions?" I continued. "If something needed to be repaired, or if there were problems with the neighbors, who would handle those things?" "We would take care of everything," Marcus assured me. "You wouldn't have to worry about any of that anymore." "That's very generous of you both. And if for some reason I did need to move to a care facility in the future, how would that work financially?" There was a brief pause, and I saw Marcus and Avalon exchange a quick glance. "Well," Avalon said carefully, "we would make sure you got the best care possible. Money wouldn't be an issue because the house would provide plenty of resources." "By selling it, you mean?" "If necessary, yes, but only to ensure you had proper care." I nodded thoughtfully, as if this all made perfect sense. "I see. And would I have any say in those decisions?" Another pause, longer this time. "Mom," Marcus said, his voice taking on a slightly impatient edge. You'd be living in a care facility because you needed specialized medical attention. The whole point would be that trained professionals would be making those kinds of decisions for you. There it was, the truth slipping through their carefully constructed lies. I understand, I said quietly. So once I sign these papers, I would essentially be giving up control over my own life. That's not how we'd put it, Avalon said quickly. We'd say you're ensuring that people who love you are in a position to take care of you. People who love me. I repeated the words slowly, letting them hang in the air. That's interesting. What do you mean? Marcus asked, his brow furrowing. I looked at Dorothy, who gave me an almost imperceptible nod. It was time. Well, I said, my voice still calm and measured, it's just that people who love me probably wouldn't spend their evenings on the phone planning to dump me in the cheapest nursing home they can find so they can buy a lake house with my money. The silence that followed was deafening. All the color drained from Avalon's face, and Marcus went completely still, his coffee cup frozen halfway to his lips. What are you talking about? Avalon whispered. I'm talking about Tuesday night, when you were on the phone discussing how easy it would be to get me declared incompetent. I'm talking about Sunset Manor, the nursing home with health department violations where you plan to abandon me. I'm talking about the $800,000 you want to steal from me. Marcus set his cup down with a shaking hand. Mom, you must have misunderstood something. We would never… Marcus. My voice cut through his lies like a blade. I heard every word, both of you, planning my entire future like I was already dead. Avalon tried to recover first, switching to damage control mode. Yvonne, you're confused. Yes, we've looked into care facilities, but only as a precaution. We've never said anything about taking your money. Really? Because I also heard you discussing the lawyer you chose specifically because he specializes in helping families steal from elderly relatives. I know about Henderson's disciplinary history with the State Bar Association. The mask was slipping from both their faces now. Marcus looked like he might be sick, while Avalon's expression was hardening into something cold and calculating. Even if you did overhear something, Avalon said, her voice no longer sweet, it doesn't change the fact that you can't manage this house on your own. You're getting older, Yvonne. You need help whether you admit it or not. Hey, you're right, I said, standing up from the table. I do need help. That's why I hired my own lawyer. I had the satisfaction of watching both their faces go pale. Yesterday, while you thought I was just making copies for the insurance company, I was actually gathering evidence of your fraud attempt. My lawyer has reviewed everything, including Robert's will, which contains several provisions you apparently didn't know about. What provisions? Marcus asked, his voice barely audible. Provisions that make it impossible for you to steal my house, even if I had been foolish enough to sign your papers. Robert knew this might happen, and he protected me from it. Dorothy stood up beside me, her presence solid and reassuring. The transfer you're trying to force would be legally invalid, she said calmly. Moreover, your attempts to manipulate an elderly person out of her property constitute criminal elder abuse under state law. Avalon's composure finally cracked completely. This is ridiculous. We're her family. We're trying to help her. By lying to her neighbors about her mental state? Dorothy continued. By choosing a disreputable lawyer to help you steal her property? By planning to abandon her in a substandard nursing home? You can't prove any of that, Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. I walked over to Robert's desk and pulled out a manila folder. Actually, we can. This folder contains documentation of every lie you've told, every manipulation you've attempted, and every step of your plan to defraud me, including recorded conversations. It was a bluff. We didn't have recorded conversations, but they didn't know that. Marcus went white as a sheet. Mom, please, we can work this out. We can forget about the transfer, go back to the way things were. No, Marcus, we can't. I looked at my son, this man I had raised and loved and sacrificed for, and felt nothing but disappointment and disgust. You called me a burden. You planned to steal my home and abandon me in a place where I would suffer and die alone. You conspired with your wife to destroy my reputation and my relationships with my neighbors. There is no going back from that. Avalon stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Fine. You want to play hardball? We'll play hardball. You're an old woman living alone in a house that's too big for you. People will believe that you need care, whether it's true or not. Actually, Dorothy said quietly, people will believe what the evidence shows. And the evidence shows that you're both criminals. Get out, I said, my voice steady despite the rage burning in my chest. Both of you, get out of my house right now. This is my childhood home, Marcus protested. You can't just throw me out. It's my house, and I'm telling you to leave. You have 1 hour to pack your things and go. If you're not gone by then, I'm calling the police. For a moment, I thought Marcus might argue further, but something in my expression must have convinced him that I was serious. He nodded slowly, looking like a stranger to me. Come on, Avalon, he said quietly. Let's go. As they walked toward the stairs to gather their belongings, Avalon turned back to me with pure venom in her eyes. You'll regret this, Yvonne. You'll end up alone and miserable, and when you do, don't come crawling back to us for help. I met her gaze without flinching. I'd rather be alone than surrounded by people who see me as nothing more than a bank account to drain. An hour later, I watched from my window as they loaded their car and drove away. The house felt different immediately, lighter, cleaner, as if a poisonous presence had been removed from the air. Dorothy put her arm around my shoulders. How do you feel? I thought about it for a moment, taking inventory of the emotions swirling through me. Relief, certainly. Sadness for the loss of the son I thought I knew. But underneath it all, something I hadn't felt in months. Freedom. I feel like I can breathe again, I said finally. And for the first time since Robert's death, that was exactly the truth. 6 months later, I stood in my kitchen making coffee for two, something I had never thought I would do again. The morning sun streamed through windows that I had replaced last month, filling the room with warm, golden light. The house felt alive again, the way it had when Robert was here, but different too. This was my space now, shaped by my choices and my dreams. The doorbell rang at exactly 8 o'clock, just as I expected. Through the window, I could see Helen Morrison walking up my front path, her silver hair catching the light and her face bright with the enthusiasm that had drawn me to her from the moment we met at the community center. "Good morning, Yvonne," she called as I opened the door. "Ready for another day of conquering the world?" I laughed, stepping aside to let her in. Helen was 73 years old, a retired teacher who had lost her husband around the same time I lost Robert. We had met at a grief support group that Dorothy had convinced me to attend, and somehow our friendship had blossomed into something that felt like family, real family, built on mutual respect and genuine affection rather than obligation and manipulation. "The coffee's ready," I told her, leading her into the kitchen, "and I have news. And good news, I hope." "The best news. Yesterday I signed the lease agreement for the apartment above the garage. Mrs. Chen's daughter Sarah is moving in next month." Helen's face lit up. "That's wonderful. You'll have some company, and the extra income will be nice too." The apartment had been Robert's workshop space, but I had spent the last 4 months converting it into a cozy one-bedroom rental. It was perfect for a young professional like Sarah, who worked as a nurse at the local hospital and wanted to be close to her mother but still maintain her independence. The rent she was paying would more than cover my property taxes and insurance, giving me financial security I had never expected to achieve on my own. "There's more," I continued, unable to keep the excitement out of my voice. "The real estate agent called this morning. The offer on Marcus and Avalon's house was accepted." Helen raised an eyebrow. "They're moving?" "Apparently they can't afford the mortgage payments anymore. The buyer is a young couple with twin babies. They're going to fill that house with love and laughter again." I felt no satisfaction in Marcus and Avalon's financial troubles, but I couldn't deny the poetic justice of it. After trying to steal my home, they were losing their own. I had heard through neighborhood gossip that Marcus had been struggling at work, missing deadlines and showing up late. Avalon had been forced to take a job at a department store, something she considered beneath her. Their marriage was reportedly strained to the breaking point. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. I glanced at the caller ID and felt my stomach tighten slightly. It was a number I didn't recognize, but I had been getting calls from Marcus for weeks now. He never left messages, but I knew it was him. "Aren't you going to answer it?" Helen asked. "No. If it's important, they'll leave a message. The truth was, I wasn't ready to talk to Marcus yet. Maybe I never would be. Dorothy thought I should consider family counseling, some kind of mediated conversation where we could work through what had happened. But I wasn't sure there was anything left to work through. Some betrayals cut too deep to heal. After Helen left, I spent the morning in my garden, something I had rediscovered in the months since reclaiming my life. Robert had always been the gardener in our family, but I was learning that I had a talent for it too. The physical work felt good, grounding me in the present moment and connecting me to the earth in a way that felt healing. I was pruning the rose bushes when I heard a car pull into the driveway. Looking up, I saw a familiar blue sedan and felt my heart skip a beat. Margaret Weinstein stepped out of the car, her expression serious but not alarmed. "Mrs. Patterson? I hope you don't mind me stopping by unannounced. I have some news I thought you'd want to hear in person." I invited her inside, my mind racing through possibilities. Over the past 6 months, Margaret had become more than just my lawyer. She had helped me understand my legal rights, connected me with financial advisors, and even introduced me to Helen at a community event for seniors. "Is everything okay?" I asked as we settled in my living room. "Everything is fine," Margaret assured me. "In fact, it's better than fine. I just received a call from the district attorney's office. Marcus and Avalon have been formally charged with attempted elder financial abuse." My breath caught. "What does that mean?" "It means that what they tried to do to you was not only morally wrong, but criminally wrong." The prosecutor reviewed all the evidence we provided, the fraudulent legal documents, the lying to neighbors about your mental state, the plan to institutionalize you unnecessarily, and decided there was enough evidence to pursue criminal charges. I sat back in my chair, not sure how to feel. Part of me was relieved that the legal system was taking their actions seriously, but part of me just felt sad that it had come to this. What happens now? They'll have to appear in court. If convicted, they could face fines and even jail time. More importantly for you, this creates a legal record of their attempted fraud, which protects you from any future schemes they might try. That afternoon, Dorothy called from Tennessee. She had been keeping in touch regularly since returning home, checking on my progress and offering support when I needed it. "I heard about the charges," she said without preamble. "Margaret called me. How are you holding up?" "I'm okay," I said, and realized I meant it. "I feel sorry for Marcus, but I'm not going to let that stop me from protecting myself." "Good. He made his choices, Yvonne. You're not responsible for the consequences." We talked for a while about lighter things: Dorothy's grandchildren, my garden, the book club I had joined at the library. It struck me how much my life had expanded in the month since Marcus and Avalon left. Without the constant stress of their presence, without the feeling that I was being watched and judged and manipulated, I had rediscovered parts of myself I thought were gone forever. That evening, as I was preparing dinner for one, something I had learned to enjoy rather than endure, the doorbell rang again. Through the peephole, I saw a young woman I didn't recognize, probably in her 30s, with short dark hair and nervous eyes. "Mrs. Patterson?" she said when I opened the door. "My name is Jennifer Walsh. I'm Marcus's ex-girlfriend from college. I was wondering if I could talk to you for a few minutes." I hesitated, unsure what this could be about, but something in her expression suggested this was important. "Of course," I said, stepping aside to let her in. Jennifer sat on the edge of my couch, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. I heard about what happened with Marcus and Avalon. It was all over social media. Some of our old college friends were talking about it. "I see. Mrs. Patterson, I need to tell you something I probably should have told you years ago, but I was young and scared, and I thought it wasn't my place." My stomach tightened. "What is it?" "Avalon tried to do the same thing to my grandmother." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What?" "This was about 8 years ago, before Marcus and Avalon got married. My grandmother had dementia, and Avalon volunteered to help take care of her. She convinced my family that Grandma needed to be in a nursing home, and she helped arrange the whole thing. She even helped us choose the facility." "What happened?" Jennifer's eyes filled with tears. "The place was horrible, understaffed, dirty, patients were neglected. My grandmother died within 6 months of being admitted. We found out later that Avalon had been taking money from Grandma's account the whole time, claiming it was for her care. I felt like I might be sick. Did you report it? We tried, but Avalon had covered her tracks well. She had convinced a doctor to sign off on Grandma's incompetency, and she had legal documents giving her power of attorney. By the time we figured out what was happening, Grandma was gone, and most of her money was too. Why didn't you warn Marcus? I tried. I told him what I suspected, but he didn't believe me. He said I was just angry about losing my grandmother, that I was looking for someone to blame. That's actually when we broke up. He chose Avalon over me. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of this revelation settling between us. Mrs. Patterson, Jennifer continued, I wanted you to know that what she tried to do to you wasn't an isolated incident. Avalon is. She's a predator. She targets elderly people with money, gains their trust, and then systematically destroys their lives. You were lucky to figure it out in time. After Jennifer left, I sat alone in my living room thinking about her grandmother, about all the other elderly people who might not have been as fortunate as I was. I thought about Robert's protective measures, about Dorothy's support, about my own stubborn refusal to sign those papers when everything in me wanted to trust my son. How many people didn't have those advantages? How many fell victim to schemes like the one that had almost destroyed me? The next morning, I called Margaret Weinstein with a proposal. I wanted to establish a foundation to help elderly people protect themselves from financial abuse. I wanted to fund legal services for seniors who couldn't afford them, and education programs to help families recognize the warning signs of elder abuse. It's a wonderful idea, Margaret said, but it will require a significant financial commitment. I have the money, I told her. The house is worth more than I'll ever need to live comfortably. I want to use that value to help other people avoid what I almost went through. 6 months later, the Patterson Foundation for Elder Protection held its first educational seminar in the community center downtown. 50 people attended, ranging from seniors wanting to protect themselves to adult children learning how to help their aging parents without taking advantage of them. As I stood at the podium, looking out at the faces in the audience, I thought about the path that had brought me here. The betrayal that had nearly destroyed me had instead become the foundation for something meaningful, something that could help other people protect themselves and their families. A year ago, I began. I was a victim. I was isolated, grieving, and vulnerable to manipulation by people I trusted. Today, I'm a survivor. And more than that, I'm someone who refuses to let my experience be meaningless. In the front row, Helen smiled and gave me a thumbs up. In the back, I spotted Mrs. Chen with her daughter Sarah, who had become not just my tenant but my friend. Dorothy had driven up from Tennessee for the event, and Margaret sat near the aisle, ready to answer legal questions after my presentation. These were my people now, not bound by blood or obligation, but by choice and mutual respect. They saw me not as a burden to be managed or an asset to be exploited, but as a whole person with value and dignity and the right to control my own life. After the seminar, as I was cleaning up the meeting room, a woman approached me. She was probably in her 60s with worried eyes and trembling hands. Mrs. Patterson, she said quietly, I think my son and his wife are trying to do to me what your son tried to do to you. After hearing your story, I recognize the signs. Can you help me? I took her hands in mine, feeling the weight of her trust and the responsibility it carried. Yes, I told her. We can help you. You're not alone anymore. And as I said those words, I realized they were true for both of us. Neither of us was alone anymore. Outside, the sun was setting over my neighborhood, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to help and to heal. But tonight I was going home to my house, to make dinner for one, and read by the fireplace and sleep peacefully in my own bed. I had never felt so free in my entire life. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.